Hello and welcome to part 23 of my video series on how to use Blender 2.6. This is a follow-up video to my fifth video in this Blender 2.6 series called Edit Mode, Extrude, and Loop Cuts. Now this is going to be a follow-up to that video, so I'm going to be talking a bit more in depth about how to use Edit Mode and how to control your vertices, edges, and faces in 3D meshes in Blender. So in part one, we talked about how to get into edit mode, how to control edges, vertices, and faces. Just as a refresher, if you press tab, in fact, what I'll do is I will turn on my display of my key so you can see what I'm pressing. So if you have an object selected, and it has to be a mesh, which is an object that is made up of edges, vertices, and faces, you go into edit mode of that object, and you can, down on here on your header, which is actually at the bottom of your 3D viewport, when you go into edit mode, so you press tab, you see different modes for selecting. You have vertices or vertices, edges, and faces. So you can select faces when you're in face mode, and you can select edges when you're in edge mode, and vertexes or vertices when you're in vertex or vertices select mode. So what you can do is you can actually just start subdividing these up. You can, I'm going to go into face select mode if my computer will let me. And if I press A, and A of course selects all or deselects all, it kind of toggles between those two. So I'm going to press A again and that deselects all the faces. I press A again and it selects them all. If I press W, it brings up my specials menu, which lets me do different things to the faces that I have selected. So I can press W, then Subdivide, and it makes a cut in each direction. So the X, Y, and Z axes, it makes one cut in each direction, making my cube have more detail. I can change the number of cuts over here in my tool shelf, but as soon as I move anything, these options go away. So I need to do that right away. If I make my cuts 2, by clicking the arrow, it makes it look like a Rubik's Cube, essentially because it has a 3x3 grid on each side, but that's made up of 2 cuts going in each of the 3 axes. If I have a face selected and I press E, E stands for extrude, and you're actually going to extrude a face out. This is all review from previous videos, so I'm going to move on now. I got a question from a user asking how to create a specific shape. The shape is in this image, if you can see it. It isn't the most dark image, but it's that shape right there. So it has some kind of funny things with it. It has, in fact, is that even the right one? Yeah, we'll just say it is. It has 2, I'm going to kind of pretend that that is a sharp corner right there. It has 2, is it? I'm not sure. I'm just going to do one side of it for now. It has 2 smooth corners on it, and so this requires a little bit more attention to detail and a little bit of planning ahead of time to create an object that has some smooth corners, but other edges, or smooth edges, and some edges are still sharp. So there's a few new things in here, so I'm going to cover that as well as some more of the basics of edit mode, or some more things in edit mode. So I'm going to go ahead and delete my cube, and I'm going to go Shift A to add a new mesh, and it's going to be a cube. We always start with a cube. A cube is the best thing to start with when you're making pretty much any shape. And I'm going to press 3 to go to my side view. Now sometimes when you're in side view or any of your views, you might be in perspective instead of orthographic. No one is really better than the other, but when you're in perspective mode, so if you press 5, I haven't got my keys set up, so I'm going to have to go into my user preferences, and under input, oh I do, emulate numpad is turned on. So I press 5, and it toggles between perspective, that's the 5 key. If you're using a full-size keyboard, it'll be on your number pad on the right-hand side. Or if you have emulate numpad turned on in preferences, you can press your 5 number row like I do. So, if you're in perspective mode, it looks kind of funny, even if you're from like the side view or the front view. So go ahead and press 5, make sure that you're in orthographic. And I'm going to press tab to go into edit mode, oopsie. And I'm going to subdivide to make that shape. So I'm going to take a look at that shape again. We'll just kind of leave it up on the screen in the background. Right about there. So it's got kind of 2 parts to it. It's like an L shape. So I'm going to cut my cube first. In fact, maybe I'll shrink it first. So I'll grab that side inside select mode and make it thinner, kind of like the one in the picture. And now I need to extrude a section from the bottom only. So I'm going to make a loop cut. Now, loop cut is Control R. And you get a pink line depending on where you put your mouse, what edge you put your mouse, it gets cut through. So I'm going to put my mouse right about on any of these three edges. And I'll click once, and then it'll let me slide it. And now if I click again where I want it to be, so I'm moving my mouse and I'll click right about there, and that makes the cut exactly where I want it to be. So now I can select this bottom face and press E to extrude out, and right about there. How accurate am I being? I messed up my... Let's see. Oh boy. Let's see if I can... It's not liking me using full screen mode. Okay, let's just go find that and open it in a different program. Open with, and we will open with Windows Photo Viewer. Sure, why not? Okay, that's even better. There we go. Okay, so we've got that basic shape. Now we have to start thinking about the rounded corners, which is really the most tricky part of this project. So let's start with this bottom corner. What we're going to do is we're actually going to do some deleting first. So I'm going to actually delete that face that I have selected, that end face. So I'll press delete on my keyboard. And the kind of rule of thumb is that if you have faces selected, you're going to delete the face. If you have vertexes selected, you want to delete, or you can press X. You want to select the one that you have selected. So if you have vertices selected or edges or faces, that's the one that you want to press. So I have faces selected, or a face, so I'm going to press faces. And actually, no, I'm going to go back. I'm going to make a cut, because it kind of is only a rounded corner, right, it only starts right about there, so near the edge. We're going to make a cut through that edge first. I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to press Control R, and we're going to make a loop cut across this way. See, Control R, I'll press Escape, and then Control R. My computer is just being a little bit slow, as normal. So I'm going to slide it right about there. And I will, okay, there we go. And now I'm going to delete that face. That was important to do. So I'll delete that face. And I'm actually going to delete these side faces too. We're going to do some work so that our topology of our mesh, in other words, how the edges, vertices, and faces are laid out, are well done. So we kind of have this weird looking shape, and you're probably wondering why I did it this way. That's because we're going to extrude up this edge. You can actually extrude edges and vertexes as well as faces. So I'm going to press E, and that lets me extrude edge up, creating a new face, but I want it to go straight up. So I'll press Z or Z. There we go. And it extrudes only up, or it moves only up when I move my mouse. So I'm going to put it right about there. And so now you can imagine we're going to have to fill in a smooth edge right there. So to do that, I'm going to press 1, I guess, no, 3. We'll go to my side view, if my computer lets me. There we go. And with that edge selected, I'm going to press E. If my computer lets me, there we go. It's going to extrude the edge up. I'll show you what that looks like in a sec. And I'm going to put it almost near where I want it to be attached. So right about there-ish. So now I've got a disconnected kind of diagonal edge. And we're going to connect it first. And then we're going to subdivide that diagonal part up to make it more smooth. So to join two edges, you have to actually be in vertex select mode or vertices select mode. And we have to do it for every vertex separately. So I'm going to select that vertex first, and then I'm going to hold Shift and right click on the next one so I have both of them selected. It's important that you know what order that you're doing it in. And then if you press W, which brings up your specials menu, you can select merge, and then it'll merge those two vertexes. But when you click merge, you get a few options. You get merge at first, merge at last, at center, at cursor, or collapse. So it matters which order that you select them in, or it matters basically that you remember what order that you selected them in. So I'm going to say at last, because I want it to be exactly right where that original one is. So I'm going to select at last, and it actually welded those two vertices together. You say the word welded because in 3D Studio Max, which I learned first, it's called welding. So I'll select that one first, shift select that one by right clicking, and I'll press W, merge, and you'll notice that it remembers your last selection, so you just have to click, 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 and at last. And now that whole edge, because the two vertexes are welded or merged, that whole edge is now welded together. So that is a solid edge now. Okay, now obviously that isn't totally smooth, it's in fact far from smooth. So I'm going to press Control R to do a loop cut. But now if I scroll up on my mouse wheel, assuming that you have a mouse wheel, you can create more loop cuts. So I can keep on going up really high, but I'm just going to make maybe, we'll say 2 for now. In fact, no, I'm going to make 3. So Control R, I just undid that with Control Z. And I'm going to make 3 cuts and click. And you notice that if you make more than 1 cut, you can't slide them anymore like you can if you had 1. So I'm going to select this middle edge, and there's a trick. If you hold Alt and right click on the edge, it selects the entire edge. You don't have to select the vertices separately. Now I'll go to my side view, and we're going to grab that edge and pull it up. But we want to actually move all 3 of those edges. But those side ones, that one and that one, we don't want to come out quite as far as that middle one. So we want to make a smooth, kind of rounded corner or edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on connected or proportional editing, which is this little round button down here. And I'm going to say enable. And now if I press G for grab, you'll notice that more vertexes move than the one I have selected. And that's because you actually have all the connected faces moving as well. But you can't really see it on my screen right now, but if I scroll up on my mouse wheel or down, you'll see this circle getting bigger and smaller. And that's the radius of the selection. That's called proportional editing. So if I make that circle smaller than the area that I want to bring out, in other words, smaller than the width of that diagonal edge, I can pull just those ones out. Now, if I scroll and make that a little bit bigger, I can make that just about right. Now I'm pulling that one too far out because I'm actually looking at the other 2 vertexes and where their position is. So I'm going to click right about there, and now I'm going to turn off proportional editing, and now I'm just going to grab that one with G and put it right about there. You could have moved those 2 separately, but that's kind of a more advanced way of doing it with proportional editing. Okay, so we've got a smoother looking edge. I'm going to make a few more cuts, so I'll press Control R and make a cut right about there and right click. I'm going to do that for each one. So right click, cut, right click, cut, right click, and did that one do something funny? Control R, click, right click. There we go. Okay, these ones are just going to have to do manually. So I'm going to zoom in, press G to grab, and just kind of move it out, and then select that one. Alt right click. Oh, that selected the wrong edge, so I have to actually look at it diagonally. So Alt right click, and then 3, and then I'm going to move it out just a little bit. We're just trying to make it as round as we can, or as smooth as we can. There we go. And G, and 3, and G. Looks pretty good to me. So now the tricky thing is to fill in this opening, and maybe I'm just a little bit off on that one. I think it's a bigger area than the other ones are. Oh well. Okay, so to fill in this missing side, there's a bad way to do it and there's a good way to do it. I could just select the entire edge around that hole by Alt right clicking on that edge, and it will select the entire thing. And then if I press Control F, that brings up my Faces menu, and I can say Fill, and it'll fill it in. And that works, but you'll notice that it just kind of made its own faces and edges in here to fill in the hole. And because there's more than 4 sides, or more than 3 or 4 sides, it can't just fill in with a polygon of unlimited amount of sides, you have to fill in with either a triangle, so a 3-sided face, or a 4-sided face. There's no such thing as a higher number of, or polygon with more than 4 faces in 3D, unfortunately. But triangles, which this is mostly made of, is bad. Having any triangles in your mesh is normally considered a very not good thing to do, because the more that you get into 3D, the more you'll realize of the benefit of having a really good topology on your mesh. So there are a few ways to fix this. They are developing a modifier that is called, if I can remember it, I think it's called, I can't remember what it's called, but it would actually fix all of these faces and make all of these faces, it actually recalculate the entire mesh into having square faces rather than triangles, and it would be the same exact mesh, other than the fact that it would fix the triangle faces. There is a tool, if you press the spacebar and do a search for TRIS, which is tries, or TRIS, there is a tool called tries to quads, which turns any triangles that it can into rectangular or square faces. So if I click that, it did simplify my faces somewhat. It did its best. It made a 1, 2, 3, 4-sided face right there, and it kind of fixed one more of them, but it still left some triangles. So this really isn't the best thing to do. So I'm actually going to delete that entire thing. And we're going to do this a little bit better. I'm going to, first of all, block out the areas that I can really do quickly. So I need to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in that area right there with a face. So I need to actually cut an edge around that bottom part of this face, or of those faces, those edges. So if I Alt right click, oops, no, it's Control Alt right click, that'll actually select all of those faces around. So that's Control Alt right click, selects a ring of faces, and I'm going to press W and Subdivide, and that will make a cut through those faces. You can alternatively just do Control R, that's probably the easier way of doing it, and then do a loop cut right there, and I'm going to click to let go right about there. I'm going to make sure that's exactly as close lined up as I can be. So I want it to line up exactly with that one right there. So I'm going to move it up to right about there. I can use my grid as a guide. And now I'm going to do the same thing I did with these. I'm going to select this edge. I'm going to press E to extrude that edge out in edge select mode. And I'll press X, I believe. No, it's the Y-axis, and pull it over to just about where it needs to be. And select that one and that one. WMerge at last. Select that one and that one. WMerge at last. We're going to do the same thing with that edge. We're going to pull it down and attach it, but we're going to do a loop cut first. So a loop cut right about there. And I will move it over to make it line up as best as we can. And let's go ahead and select that edge, E, and then Z, because we're moving it up and down. Oops, Z. Move it right to about there. And I'm going to select that one and that one, WMerge at last. And if my computer lets me, there we go, WMerge at last. This is where it gets a little bit more tricky. I'm going to have to fill in this area. We have to do this kind of, we have to kind of plan this out in our heads first before we can fill this in. We don't want to have any triangles. So if you imagine if I started pulling, though, if I did a cut like that, and I started pulling these down to match up, I would be left with a triangle down here. But what I should actually do, I'm going to undo a few steps if my computer will let me. There we go. Oops, I went too far. WMerge at last. I'm going to have to find one of these faces that I can actually kind of combine to make a rectangle. So you can imagine if I pulled that edge down, that would be fine. Same with all these ones. But this edge and this edge is actually going to be a two sides of the same quad, of the same rectangular face. So I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to do Control R, and we're going to make a cut across this way. So click, and then I'm going to pull it over to right about there. I'm going to make sure that lines up as best as we can. And now I'm going to extrude this face up, or this edge up, so E and Z. Oops. And that looks about good. Now in vertex select mode, I'm going to select that one and then that one and merge those together. So WMerge at last, and select that one, and WMerge, oops, I did subdivide, WMerge at last. So it looks distorted, but actually it is a four-sided face, and that's what we want. We don't want to have any triangular faces at all in our mesh. Now I'm going to select those and just kind of fix that diagonal edge. Maybe what I'll do is I will turn on my back faces, so that little button right there, and then I'll press B for box select and box select all those ones, making sure that I have the back one selected too, and I'll move it over, and then I'll press, how many more cuts do I have to do? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'll press Control R and then scroll up 2, 3, 4, 5 and click. And now we can just extrude these edges up. So I'll hold Shift to right and right click to select more of those edges. Did I miss one? Yes, I did. And E and Z, so it extrudes straight up to right about there for now. I'll press 3 and I'll turn off my back faces so I don't accidentally select them. And now select WMerge Last, select WMerge Last, select WMerge Last. I'll be silent from now on. You will notice that my WMerge Last, that they are diagonal, so I will have to fix them the same way that I fixed the smaller face down there. Okay, so I'll go to 3, my side view, and select turn on back faces. If it's light, you can see the back faces. If it's dark, you cannot see the back faces. I always forget that. So A to deselect, and then B, box select those ones, make it straight up and down. A, B, move it over, straight up and down. Approximately, I'm not going to be too picky here. And right there. And right there. Sure, why not? And I think that one's a little bit off too for some reason. Okay, if I was really picky, I could add more subdivides all the way through here and just pull the top ones up to make more edges going across that to make it smoother. But I will show you how to make it smooth just using the smooth tool and a new modifier. So I could spend that entire time doing this side as well, but I'm going to do it the smart way. I'm going to make a cut down the middle, so Control R to loop cut and click and right click. And I'm going to delete the side that is not filled in. So I'm going to delete that one, and I selected vertices, so I'm going to do delete vertices. And now I will apply that good old handy mirror modifier. I have a lesson on the mirror modifier. I'll put the link up on the screen if you don't know how to use it. So it's the mirror modifier right there, and it made a nice filled inside. So I'm going to press merge and clipping. Not really sure what clipping does, but oh yes I do, yeah. I talked about that in the video. And then apply. And then I have that rounded edge. Now, if I press smooth over here, it does a bad job. Smooth only works if you have a smooth or an object that does not have 90-degree corners on it. If you get too high of a angle, in other words, anything above like a 60-degree angle between two edges, smooth will not work properly. What it's doing is it's actually blending the color or the shade of gray, depending on your lighting, from one face, from the center of one face, so the center of this face, it'll blend it from there over to there. Now these two are the same color, depending on where the light is, but that face is definitely going to be a different shade of gray because of the light than that face, and it tries to blend it, but it doesn't do a very good job. And in fact, if you render out a smooth object with smoothing turned on a cornery object or an object with edges, you'll actually get flickering, and that's really bad. So there is a tool, and it's a modifier, and it's called the Split Edge Modifier, and it fixes this problem. We want the smooth turned on because we want that corner to not be all kind of facety, to have edges on it. Like if I turn this to flat, you'll see that it kind of looks really bad in there. So if I want smooth turned on, but not all over the place, I can use a modifier called edge split, and that will kind of artificially split the edges depending on what angle you set. So if I make my angle really high, above 90 degrees, it'll still smooth that edge. But if I turn the split angle to less than 90 degrees, so 88 or so, or even less, it will artificially split the edges where you don't want it to smooth. And therefore, we still have the smooth on that smooth edge, but not on the edges where we don't want it to be. So in that image, in that shape, it's got a smooth edge right there, but not on that side as far as I know. Looking at it now, I notice that it probably is there. So it was good that I did these two edges first and then apply the mirror modifier. So now I can just work on one side without it mirroring over to the other side. Of course, I could leave the mirror modifier on, or I could have, and just done it on both sides. But I'm going to do it just on one side. So this is our shape right now. The topology is pretty uneven because there's lots of density right there, but it's pretty slack over here. But depending on your mesh, that could be okay. So we want to have a smooth corner right there. So we're going to do the same thing as we did over here. We're going to make a cut through that way first because we don't want the smooth corner to go all the way. It's not going to be a whole smooth. It's going to only start it right about from there to there. So I will make a loop cut, Control R, and then click, and then right click to put it in the middle approximately, a little bit farther down. And I will delete, I believe I want to delete just those ones, I believe, yeah. So the back one, if my computer will let me spin orbit my view. Excuse me. So those three, and I'll press delete, and faces. And I will select that edge and move it over to about halfway. Select that one and move it up on the Z axis only. I had to press Z twice for some reason, or Z twice. And we're going to do the same thing, E, and move it up. It would have been better if I had done that from my front view. So E, put it near but not exactly. And then over to vertex select mode, select that one. My computer or laptop does not like me using screen capture and Blender at the same time. WMerge at last. WMerge at last. Control R. Scroll up. Maybe I'll do, yeah, sure, 3 cuts that time as well. Select that, just that one, with Alt right click. Go to my front view. Turn on proportional editing, which is actually the O key, and press G. And I'll change scroll up or down, actually it's down, to make my circle that big, and pull up. And then press O to turn off proportional editing, and G right about there. And Control R, right click, Control R, click, right click, Control R, click, right click, Control R, right click, and that one, and that one. I wonder what happens if I try. So I'm going to Alt right click to get that one. Then I'll hold Alt and Shift and get those ones. And one. I'm just going to press S and see what happens. No. What if I put my 3D cursor right about there? And then if I press my, or if this menu right here, controls where my scale scales from. So if I have my 3D cursor right there, and when we want it to scale outwards or in relation to that 3D cursor, I can change my pivot point of my transformations to 3D cursor. Right now it's at median point, which is the default, so I'll have to put it back there, back to that one after. But I'll change it to 3D cursor and press S, and you'll see how they all scale out from that point, which really helps in this case. Now, is it making them wider too? Yes, it is, and it's not, it's moving it that way as well. So I'm going to do S and then Shift X, I believe. Yeah, let's see how that works. S Shift X, because I believe, excuse me, we don't want it, or it's actually Shift Y. We don't want it to scale on the green, the Y axis. So I'll press S, then Shift Y, and it'll only now scale it towards, it won't scale it on that Y axis. So I'm going to go back to my front view, pressing 1, S Shift Y, which stops it from scaling on the Y axis, and then I'll move it out just slightly. The more you get used to these tools, the quicker it'll be, of course. So it took me probably longer to explain it to you than it would have just to move those edges individually. But that's a faster technique, especially if you're doing a lot of those edges. So that looks pretty good. Maybe I scaled it a little bit too much. Yeah, so I'm going to press S, Shift Y, and we'll scale them in just a tad. And that looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to do the same thing, cutting it this way. So Control R and right click. And I'm going to move it up to match that vertex there. And I will move that edge across. So E, and then I believe it's the X axis. Sure. And we'll do some merging over here. No, I gotta turn my back faces off so I don't accidentally select them. W, merge at last. W, merge at last. And we'll do another cut this way. One needs to line up with that one. Now I'm messing up anything down here? No, I'm not. So I need to select this edge and extrude it upwards, and then press Z. I'm having to press it twice. I'm not exactly sure why. Actually, what I'll do is I'll select that whole edge, Alt right click on that one, and I'll move it over first to just about there. W merge at last. W merge at last. Now, we have to do the same thing on the back as well, unfortunately. We can't mirror it in this case, but I will just finish this side, and it will be done exactly the same on the back side, of course. So this video is really about a few things. The fact that you can fill in edges by being smart about your topology, that you want to avoid triangle faces, and you want to really control how you're making any specific shape, and that any shape really is possible when you start from a cube. It really, really is. And of course how we use the edge split and the smooth tool together. So I'm going to make this smallest triangle problem here into a square face by going Control R and then sliding it down to right about there. I'm going to press 1 and make it line up better right about there. Extrude that one up, E and then Z. And with my vertex selected, W merge last, and W merge, oops, W merge at last. And then how many cuts here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So Control R, 2, 3, 4, 5 by scrolling up. And I will select these edges, extrude them up on the Z axis. Select that one, W merge at last. W merge at last, W merge at last, W merge at last. It's having that, it usually finds the one that you selected last as long as you're not too near to the edge of your screen, which is why it was doing that a few times. W merge at last, W merge at last. And if you have the back faces dark, you might accidentally merge, let's say, the vertex that was right here over to the back one instead. So you gotta watch out that you know which ones that you're selecting, or which vertexes you're selecting in 3D, of course. I'm going to go quickly and fix these edges. It's going to be more difficult than it should be because I already have a lot of complicated stuff down here. So I'm just going to unselect, hold Shift and right click on those two. And now I can slide that entire edge loop that way. Alt right click there. And then hold Shift and right click on those two, and now I can slide this one down so it's approximate. If you really need to be exact, you can press your N key to get your properties panel up, And if you right click on a vertex, you can find its exact location, and in fact you can copy and paste from these locations too. So if I really needed that to be at exactly the same point or location on the x-axis, I could do that, but I'm not going to bother. Eyeballing it is just fine for me in this case. And I'll right click on those ones, and I'll right click. Alright, I think that pretty much sums it up. You'll notice that because I added more detail and I did work to my mesh after I pressed smooth originally, the new faces will not have smooth applied to them, so I just have to press smooth again and it'll smooth out my shape. I still have that hole in the back. I'm going to kind of ignore that for now. That's done the same way. And I can leave my edge split modifier there. I don't have to apply it. It can just stay there if I'm not doing anything else to the shape. But that pretty much finishes up this video. I talked about how to extrude edges and merge vertexes, and how to use the edge split modifier. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time.